Brian Lehrer on WNYC. All right, hold on to your steering wheels, folks. Now we're going to talk about the BQE. I think it's fair to say that for as long as anyone can remember, the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway has had problems, right? Major problems. Even non-drivers know this. It's loud, it's clogged, it carries far more traffic than it was built for, and parts of it are literally falling apart. But despite decades of studies, emergency repairs, and big proposals from multiple mayoral administrations, there's been a kind of bureaucratic paralysis, you might call it. No matter who's in office, the city can't seem to land on or fund a permanent fix. So what's the holdup? That's what we're going to spend the next few minutes talking about. For some context, the BQE was designed way back under Robert Moses, the infamous and controversial master builder of mid-20th century New York, who designed practically every major city thoroughfare that you could think of and displaced a whole lot of people in the process. But before that legacy was cemented, when the BQE was first unveiled, it was hailed as a feat of modern engineering in an increasingly car and truck-centric city. Here's a clip of then-Governor Thomas Dewey at the 1950 ribbon-cutting ceremony for the BQE.
Because this business is the business of making it possible for people who live in the city to move about in it without being choked to death by traffic. It's the difference between a chance to get food and vegetables and manufactured products in and out of the city, fast, cheaply. And in order to reduce the cost of living, these highways are essential. In order to make possible trips out of the city by the people who want to get away for weekends, these highways are essential. In order to make commuting traffic, which keeps the city growing and great, these highways are essential.
How about that for a clip from the archives? Governor Thomas E. Dewey in 1950 at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the BQE. So here we are a little over 75 years later, and there's no question that those highways are still essential, to use Governor Dewey's word, but they're also essentially on the brink of collapse, especially the triple cantilever section, as it's known, of the BQE. Now, WNYC is hosting an event next Tuesday in the Green Space. That'll be a conversation between Stephen Nessen, our great transportation reporter here at WNYC and Gothamist, and Ian Coss, the host of GBH's Peabody-winning podcast, The Big Dig, which is about a big road project up in Boston. They're going to be talking about the past, present, and future of the BQE with transportation expert Polly Trottenberg along and community advocate Laura Bernbach. Tickets are sold out already, but you can live stream it when the time comes next Tuesday at wnyc.org/BQE. So bookmark that if you're interested in it, wnyc.org/BQE. And Stephen and Ian join us now to preview the conversation. Stephen, hi. Always great to have you on the show. Ian, welcome to WNYC.
Thanks for having me.
Hey.
Always great to partner with GBH folk. Stephen, first, you want to just tell the listeners why you're having a Green Space public event about the BQE?
Well, it might actually be more appropriate for Ian to discuss it because his amazing podcast, he can tell you about it. He's been taking it on the road. Ian, why don't you tell them about the Big Dig on the road?
All right. So a couple years ago, I did a podcast series about the notorious Boston highway project known as the Big Dig. And as a follow-up to that, over the years since, I continue to get emails from people about other highway projects in other cities, and I never knew how to respond to them. And so this year we're doing a 10-city nationwide tour of live tapings that we call the Highway Teardown Tour, and basically taking this question on the road of what should American cities do with their old highways? As you said at the top, this is kind of a universal story, right? These highways through the middle of cities, they are aging out, they're crumbling, they're congested, they have all kinds of problems, and the question is what to do with them. And so that's why I'm excited to be in New York talking about one of the granddaddy of those complicated highways, the BQE.
And I want to apologize and correct. I mispronounced your last name. I added an R. You are not Ian Cross. You are Ian Coss, C-O-S-S, right?
Yes, as somebody wittily pointed out to me, that is my cross to bear.
Your cross to bear. So you're telling us, Ian, that as much as people in New York, especially in Brooklyn and Queens, think this is a particularly New York City thing, you're telling us it's not.
Yeah, I mean, there was this mid-century building spree, right, in the 60s, 70s, when, just as that clip illustrated, there was this enthusiasm around urban highways as something that would connect the urban center to the suburbs, to the outlying areas, that would be an economic boom, that would get rid of congestion. And so, I mean, virtually every American city built these big structures, often along the waterfront, often through underserved neighborhoods, often, dividing neighborhoods from each other. And so that is the legacy that we're now reckoning with. And a lot of these structures, like I said, are aging out around the same time. They were built to last for 50 or 60 years, and now they're 60, 70 years old. And so something has to be done, right? Doing nothing is not an option. But yeah, you can see this in Detroit. You can see this in Seattle. You can see it in New Orleans. You can see it in Baltimore. I mean, it is everywhere.
Stephen, you want to comment on that archive clip from the Governor Dewey ribbon cutting? There it was, 1950, and the way he's framing the advent of the BQE, I'm sure made people almost drive off the road if they were driving and listening right now. Quote, making it possible for people who live in the city to move about in it without being choked to death by traffic.
Yeah. From all accounts that I read, that didn't last very long. The traffic built up pretty quick. But just to it really dovetails nicely with what Ian was saying, is Robert Moses, obviously, prior to the BQE, built his highways to Long Island. And so the BQE was really the final piece of his puzzle to connect those Long Island commuters so they could drive through Brooklyn to get to Manhattan. And like I was saying, almost immediately traffic filled up, and it didn't work out quite as Dewey had envisioned. And like Ian was saying, we really are sort of stuck with this design today that, as you know, is constantly clogged with traffic, is well beyond its useful life. And now, just like those other cities, but maybe even more so because New York City is just so built up, it's just such a bedeviling problem for planners, for New York City, but also for the state DOT because they own part of it. The federal government owns a part of it. So it's just such a complicated roadway. And like you were saying at the top in the intro, it's like, what should we do with this? And a lot of ideas have been floated, and there's some on the table right now that could be advanced. But, I think really the next 2 years are going to be quite crucial for making a decision on that.
So listeners, you can weigh in on that question. What should we do with it? What should we do with the BQE? If you drive it, if you live in Brooklyn Heights or elsewhere along the route, what do you think the potential plan should be? How do you feel about potential plans that have been floated that you may have been aware of as part of the community of drivers or nearby residents? 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. Call or text. Do you think the city should restore what already exists or rethink the highway entirely? You can also ask questions to our guests about what plans may be in the works and how those plans might affect residents. 212-433-WNYC. And how does the BQE and how do the BQE's problems affect your life today? Tell everybody else. 212-433-WNYC, 433-9692. So, Stephen, under former Mayor de Blasio, the transportation department for the city warned, this is back in 2018, that without major intervention, the cantilever section of the BQE would collapse by 2026. It's 2026.
Here we are. Here we are.
On a day-to-day basis, how risky is it?
Well, the DOT say, of course, safety is paramount. They've got all kinds of sensors. They're monitoring it. And they've done a lot of work since then to shore up the roadway, to make it safe. Any driver that tries to drive in the evening knows they're constantly doing work to repair different pieces, replace certain parts of the decking and the steel. And I think the biggest thing they did, which took a long time actually to implement, was these weight in motion sensors that basically ticket overweight trucks that are not supposed to be on that roadway. So that's gone a long way to sort of preserving the roadway they have. Also, folks know they reduced the lanes of traffic from 3 to 2. Another method so that they're not putting too much weight on the triple cantilever section, which really is only 0.4 miles of this very long roadway. But it's the most, sensitive. It's the one that they said was going to collapse by 2026 if we didn't do something. The DOT took us underneath the BQE at that point and showed us holes in the roadway, holes in the steel. They were really quite alarmed and wanted to push through a plan pretty quickly. And obviously, that fizzled under de Blasio. Right.
So talk about that, and then we're going to bring Ian in on this because he's got all this history from here and around the country. But why did the plan fizzle? It seems like there is bureaucratic paralysis.
Well, I guess the problem was the DOT, led by Polly Trottenberg at that time, they basically put out 2 proposals. One was to put a temporary elevated roadway at the level of the promenade and then destroy the BQE beneath it and rebuild it. But folks in Brooklyn Heights, hackles were raised. Of course, they don't want a highway, at street level where they live, all the pollution and everything that comes with that. So that plan was completely destroyed. The other suggestion was to, close it down on weekends, a full lane closure, 24 weekends over 8 years. But they believe that, could have been done in, that amount of time for $4 billion. Folks just found that would be too disruptive. So they went back to the drawing board. They came up with this panel. They came up with recommendations to extend the life of the BQE while they came up with a permanent plan. And under Adams, they put out this huge list of options that I think you may recall. We've spoken about it before. There's like the cookie cutter, the cake like design, like a wedding cake with all these different layers. A bunch of those were floated, and that's sort of where we are right now. Folks are still, the city's preparing an environmental review for all those proposals. They're not going to say which one they want. Some of them would put the BQE even underground, big dig style, although I'm told that's not very popular or practical. And there's a lot of considerations right now because, now there's the Brooklyn Bridge Park, which wasn't there when Robert Moses built the BQE. And there's ball fields, and the MTA has a fan plant that really makes it difficult to work on the roadway because that needs to be preserved. So it's a challenging situation over there.
John in New Canaan, Connecticut, who used to live in Brooklyn Heights. Hi, John. You're on WNYC.
Hi, Brian. I apologize. I have a brain injury, so I stutter every once in a while.
Okay, it's all right.
So, no, my comment was, I agree that the BQE needs to be replaced. It needs to be replaced for 25 or 30 years. But the metropolitan area is 3 times the size it was when it was built. And so the amount of traffic using it is, I won't say exponentially higher, but it's much, much greater than the planned maximum usage. The other thing is, we as Americans, and you can see this throughout New York City, you can see it throughout Connecticut where I live now, is once we build things, infrastructure projects, we don't fund them. We don't fund their upkeep. We've built them. We've paid for it. And that's one of the problems. That was historically kind of the problem with BQE, with the Brooklyn Bridge until they kind of redid that. Things like that. We don't fund the upkeep, the maintenance that we really need to do.
John, I'm going to leave it there for time, but thank you very much. And I'll just say I'm really glad that despite your stutter, you called up to talk on the radio. Keep it up. And Alan in Brooklyn, you're on WNYC. Hello.
Good morning, Brian. Thank you. Before I was a lawyer, I studied architecture, and although you learn the strength of materials at their peak, it's a little bit arrogant to think that we should be testing every material to the maximum stress capacity it has when it's new, knowing that the only reason we see Roman architecture surviving 2,000 years is that they never did this sort of thing. They didn't test materials that are meant to be in compression by putting them in tension and relying on the reinforcing bars in concrete to last more than a few decades.
Alan, thank you very much. So kind of combining those two callers, Ian, I mean, there's this historical tension that's probably important to talk about. Robert Moses could move fast because he centralized power and often sidelined community input. And the result of that approach was often massive displacement and long-term harm. Today, there are environmental reviews, community boards, lawsuits, elected officials weighing in. So as we've seen, with a population 3 times the size of what it was in 1950, according to the first caller, it's been really hard to get everyone on the same page and get a plan in motion. So reporting on these kinds of things from around the country, how do you see that trade-off, and how do you weigh the importance of community buy-in and control when it's also contributing to a paralysis?
Yeah. I think something I found really interesting in studying these highway removal debates in different cities is that you can see there are these coalitions that come together and then fracture around these issues where, for example, there will be a camp of people who are really neighborhood focused, who are focused on, the impact of the noise of the traffic on the people who live right next to it. But then there will also be more sort of like regional transit activists who are thinking more about like, how do we reduce the carbon impact, the climate impact of these roads? How do we shift the city towards a different kind of regional transit system? And on some issues, those two groups might align, and then on some issues they might divide. There are some business interests that will organize around supporting removing a highway, some that would oppose it. And so you get this very complicated shifting ground around these projects that can often lead, exactly as you said, to paralysis. In a kind of studying up on the history of the BQE, I was just reading a statement that Polly Trottenberg, who will be one of our guests next Tuesday, she put out at the time, at one of these community events, saying, look, there is no solution that everyone's going to be happy with. There is no perfect solution to this. People will be unhappy. And so that is the point that the decision-making process has to get to, where somebody has the political will and political capital to say, okay, we have heard the various interests and desires around this, and I'm willing to push through with this decision, knowing that there will be people unhappy with this, and I will take that heat. And obviously that moment has not arrived yet, but I think it's good to be clear-eyed with these projects that there is no perfect solution that pleases everyone.
Stephen, a few of the texts coming in. Listener writes, for me, the BQE is like a large snake. I find it fascinating from a distance, but avoid any close contact at all costs. Another person asks why they built Brooklyn Bridge Park before they resolved the problems with the cantilever. Do you have an answer to that question?
I do not have an answer other than development continues and proceeds whether the cantilever problem is solved or not. I think they just made it a little more complicated. But, the Brooklyn waterfront, I forgot exactly when, probably under Bloomberg, you could help me out there, was rezoned, and all those, massive luxury buildings went up down there. It's really nice. And I think just not doing that sort of park improvement, waiting for a BQE solution was, folks weren't going to wait around for that.
And that is where we will leave it for today. My guests have been Stephen Nessen, our transportation reporter here at WNYC and Gothamist, and Ian Coss, a reporter for GBH, who hosts the Peabody-winning podcast, The Big Dig. They're going to be speaking about the BQE again next Tuesday. Again, if you want to immerse yourself in this and hear more, it's going to be at the Green Space, WNYC's theater, with transportation expert and really relevant newsmaker to this story, Polly Trottenberg, because she was the transportation commissioner under Mayor de Blasio when some of the restructuring plans that have not been implemented were formed, and also community advocate Laura Bernbach. Tickets are sold out, but you'll be able to live stream it at wnyc.org/BQE. Is that 7 o'clock? And do I have the right time next Tuesday?
Yeah, that's right.
7 p.m. at wnyc.org/BQE. BQE. Stephen, thanks. Ian, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.